report a record. Get ready for hot stuff. Be prepared for an alien Star Watch coming to your area. You have the 911 tapes.
County Dispatch, may I help you?
Yeah, did you get any reports of any object in the air about 15 minutes ago?
Somebody called in, but I really don't know what that would be.
Yeah, I mean, it was very strange.
Okay.
Looked like a back end of like one of them fighter planes, like a plane coming out the back.
Okay. Was it just like moving at a slow rate of speed?
It wasn't a slow rate, it was a fast rate, but it was coming down.
It was coming down?
Yeah.
Like straight down or at an angle?
Like an angle.
At an angle? Okay.
I mean, it wasn't real big in the back.
Okay.
Plane.
All right. I'll tell you what, we'll check with the Air Base in Vienna and see if they have any report of anything in the area.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That's right, we do have the 911 tapes, and we're going to be playing them for you tonight. But what's even better than that is that we're going to be joined once again by Mr. Thomas Wertman, the president of Ohio MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network. It's an international UFO investigation group, and he's in charge of all the investigations that happen here in Ohio.
Yeah, this is such a good interview. It's just fun listening to him tell stories, and he's got one of those great, deep, like George Norrie kind of coast-to-coast radio voices, so he's just fun to listen to.
Yeah, and what we're talking about tonight, and I cannot wait to get into it, because Dan, this is one of the most credible UFO sightings that has ever happened, and it happened right over here, right above us in the Buckeye State. We're going to be discussing the 1994 mass UFO sighting that took place in Trumbull County, Ohio, and it has everything that you'd want for a credible UFO encounter. You got 15 police officers that have witnessed this UFO. Plus, we have the local 911 recordings, and you'll hear a bunch of different civilians calling in reports. You're going to hear the news media, and we're going to be cutting that up and playing it for you as Thomas Wertman takes us through it and explains it in a way that only he can. You know what I mean? Like, nobody knows more about this stuff than he does, and I think that we put together a really cool show for you tonight. I want you to have this frame of reference now. When you listen to this, think about where we're at society-wise now, where we have our own government telling us that for years they'd been lying to us and saying that what people were seeing wasn't there, wasn't real. But now, all of a sudden, Dan, they're talking about UFOs, that they're a real thing, right?
Right, and I was going to say, if you're wondering why, when you're hearing about one of the most credible UFO sightings of all time in our area, with all these police officers, if you're wondering why you never heard about it, it's because it was basically covered up. Mm-hmm. And the way we even know about it is a great story that Tom will tell you.
Yeah, this is a wild story. I mean, you've had a lot of researchers out there for years that look into different UFO-related events. And there's a gentleman in Ohio named Leonard Stringfield who was an excellent researcher. And his time frame goes back like 1950s, 60s, 70s. He did a number of books on the subject. But his favorite thing is going after, like, crashes. He loved to look into those. And he was putting out a series of articles, basically the status of UFOs, status of like crash retrievals, etc. And he mentioned a case in Ohio that was in Liberty, Ohio, which is like the southern portion, down closer to like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He put this story out about a reported crash down here. Well, Kenny Young, who lived in Cincinnati, was really interested in UFOs. He started reading over this stuff, and he got interested in this story, one of the stories down there in that area. Now, I was looking that up this afternoon just for curiosity, and the closest one I can identify with happened about 1977 down in that region. And it was about a reported crash in which the military is actually called in, according to what I found in Stringfield's article. The military was called, and then the rumor was some military personnel were injured and killed. And then there were bodies and stuff recovered and taken back to Wright-Patterson. Well, Kenny Young was really curious about, this a case like this down in that region, and he started researching it. So he said, okay, if it happened in Liberty, let's call up Liberty and the police department and find out what went on, because reportedly the chief of police was involved with this. So you got a picture here. The time frame is like roughly right around 1990, 92, 93 in there someplace. He calls up. Actually, take it back. It was later than that. It had to be like mid to late 90s. He calls up Liberty, or calls up Directory Assistance, I should say, and says, "Hey, I want to be connected to the Liberty Police Department." Because, I mean, think about it, back in the 1990s, we didn't have Google and all that stuff.
Right.
So he goes to Directory Assistance, says, "Connect me to Liberty Police Department." He gets in touch with dispatch, and he says, "I'd like to talk to you about a UFO event that happened, at Liberty." And they said, "Oh, yeah, we know the event. It happened a couple years ago." Well, things didn't quite seem right, but he went and just rolled with it, and the dispatcher told him about the events. What was interesting with it is the events that she was talking about didn't align with what he was looking for.
And the time frame, I'm sure, didn't either. So he's probably like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, and after he said it took him 2 weeks of researching this, going through everything. He says, "This doesn't seem like it's the right case at all." And then he finds out that the Liberty that they connected him with, Directory Assistance, was Liberty Township, which is in the northeast part of Ohio by Youngstown. And he was looking for Liberty Police Department, which is in the opposite corner of the state, the southwest corner. So he just rolled with it and said, "Hey, this case actually seems way better maybe than what I'm looking at," because they were talking about UFOs being seen actually over a couple different nights in the Liberty area where police cruisers were involved. You had up to like 14 police officers that reportedly observed things.
There's about 10 other people in Liberty who are just swearing up and down they saw a UFO.
Oh,
they'll have a ball with it, because, I mean, they called already.
So what did they say? Did you guys locate anything?
Yeah, well, they're like, people are serious. They're very upset. And I'm like, well, it's got to be a weather balloon or something. And I knew it wasn't a weather balloon because FAA would know about it.
Prosecutor said it was green and blue lights?
Well, no. The media said it was green and blue lights. I had a man who said he said, the thing is, it's got huge and it doesn't make any noise.
That's what I saw.
And I said, could it be like a weather balloon? He goes, no. He goes, these lights are incredibly bright. And he goes, and this thing's just hovering. It's not moving. And I said, well, maybe it's a private plane or something.
This thing, whatever it was, lit up. I mean, literally lit up. You could stand, if you were underneath it, you could see it would be like daylight, those red lights.
Well, I logged it. I know this is coming back up. I know everybody and their brother's going to be calling tomorrow. And I'm like, I logged it.
I saw it. Oh, my God.
No, I didn't log you saw it. But you know what? They'll be pulling that tape. We're all going to get our asses shucked. You watch federal government will come out here and go, okay, we're going, oh, little green men, Santa Claus, flying Christmas tree, all this shit on the channel. We're all going to get our asses in a grinder. Maybe I want So, I don't know. If it was a UFO, it's logged, But, I mean, you saw it. Well, what did you think it was? What did you really think it was?
I don't know. I didn't hear me. I came across it. So whatever it is, it's big.
But you know what? I know you play. You know what I mean? I know you joke around. That's what I said.
I wasn't joking. I was not joking.
For a minute, it didn't sound like you were. I mean, you were laughing, and then all of a sudden you weren't laughing. And I thought, well, maybe he's trying to make me, think there's really this UFO there. And I was like, oh.
No, I wasn't joking. I saw the light. I saw a large red light. A false light.
Hold on one second. Helen Guy, you think I'm a UFO expert? He was talking to me. You want me to let you go?
Yeah, all right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, sweetheart. Take care.
But in Liberty Township, they had been witnessing multiple nights of some kind of unexplained aerial activity.
Well, that's what came out, because what he did is he got put this report on his own website. He had a website he ran, and he wrote the report up about what he got from dispatch. He posted it out there, and he says, next thing you know, he gets this letter that says, hey, we've been doing some follow-up. The individual said that they were actually with the 911 call center in the Youngstown area. They said that they saw the report online of his. They went back and they said, anybody remember this UFO thing back at such and such a time frame? And they started pulling all their minds together, and they started going through their materials, and they found the 911 tapes from those given nights. Well, he gets later on another note that says, hey, keep checking your mailbox. And it's like, what? Just keep checking your mailbox. Well, this box arrives, opens the box up, it's got tapes in it, and there's a newspaper in there. And the newspaper, what somebody had done is taken a newspaper and cut all the letters out like a ransom note. And they wrote a message and put in it. And I guess that's what they said that they did at this 911 call center, probably out of boredom. That there are times that they had extra time on their hands, and when they found these interesting cases, they would create their own like little phony headlines to go along with the tapes.
Okay.
So they cut this out, and basically what the note said is, for the record, get ready for hot stuff. Be prepared for an alien Star Watch coming to your area. It went along a little bit farther than that, but it said, you have the 911 tapes. In the box were the 911 tapes from that event. Now, the only way he could kind of tell the date, because evidently the tapes were not marked from what he said. He could tell the date by the newspaper articles inside, which showed as like December 14th of 94. So that's when he kind of created, the date that he said this happened. But there's been questions regarding that date as far as accuracy. But when you start going through the tapes, it really gets interesting because you see how the tone of a police department changes as more and more reports start coming in over a time frame.
Okay.
Bob, I swear to God, 4 calls in on an unidentified object over Liberty.
4 calls.
4 calls on an unidentified flying object.
Well, now take a look. All right, we'll check it out.
They go from basically being joking.
I'm stroking the hell out of this guy. Was it moving in slower his speed? Did it dip directly down? I'm going to start a freaking panic. You guys got freaking UFOs over there?
Making fun of stuff.
Yeah, ask them if they got any Fox in town.
Huh?
Ask them if Fox is in town.
If Doc is in town?
Fox.
Spock. Oh, you mean like Generation Star Trek thing? Smart ass. I'll tell them they're filming the sequel right here in Liberty.
Wait a minute, we got to figure out how to explain this away now. Because we don't have an explanation. We got to come up with some way to kind of like distract everybody from this whole story, Hope it goes away.
You could hear that at one point. I think the dispatcher says that the FAA guy gave her some numbers to call if she wanted to report a UFO, and she's like, I'm not calling.
Yeah, her name was actually Royanne Rudolph.
She was great.
Oh, she was fantastic. I mean, if I was running a police department, I would have wanted her on dispatch because
For sure.
she handled it so incredible.
And she was funny, too.
Oh, she was. I mean, because when you play the tapes, and the tapes that, by the way, to point this out is they weren't over like a 3-hour time frame. They're actually like over a whole night. And the way I understand it, they're actually potentially a combination of 2 different days. And when you go through and you cut out all the portions of them in between, and you start pulling everything together, and now you eventually works down to maybe about 2-3 hours time frame total to hear these reports coming in. But you got the reports coming in, and it starts out by like you got dispatcher, and she's just being kind of like nonchalant, phone call comes, and you can tell it's like an elderly gentleman. It says, hey, I'm out here on Sampson Drive. And Sampson Drive is north of Youngstown area. And he goes, I'm looking outside, and he says, I see this green light that's really bright. It looks almost like the exhaust of a jet. And he says, it's low to the ground. And she goes, okay, okay, we'll look into it, kind of like pushing away, saying, oh, yeah, sure. What you've been drinking tonight, buddy,
Yeah, exactly.
Type of thing. Well, the next thing you know, you've got like 4 different phone calls coming in, along with a local TV station.
996. 996. We have a report by CC. Actually, 2 calls in of a vehicle in the sky, unknown object above Sampson Drive. Have you noticed anything? To our knowledge, we've had 4 different calls, and this particular one came over Sampson.
Okay, different areas on Samson itself.
Yeah, they just said in the sky. That's all we have, in the sky.
Okay. Out in the area.
Out in the area, checking for an object in the sky. Copy at...
Well, the phone calls start coming in, and she reaches out to her captain, and she doesn't call him captain, but she calls him by name. And she goes, we just got 4 calls in here about a UFO out on Sampson Drive, and they're all in the same area. And she goes, you want me to call the air traffic control on this? He goes, no, I'll kind of go out and check it out myself, And she goes, maybe Spock came to the region. He starts making a joke himself. He says, maybe Spock is out there. And she goes, well, they could be shooting a new Star Trek movie around here someplace. They're all making jokes about this whole thing. Well, you can kind of see the situation developing because the phone calls start coming in. The next thing you know, here comes a reporter calling in to dispatch.
County dispatch, can I help you?
Yeah, I do. This is Stacy from 33.
From Channel 33. Channel 33 is a local TV station. And what they did, by the way, back then is they monitored the police traffic on a scanner.
This is going to sound really dumb. I hear Liberty Police are in an area that I got a call about a little bit ago. A woman called, claimed she saw something in the sky.
Yeah, you called me a little while ago.
Okay. I hear they're out there and they've got another call.
Yeah, we finally got one on it somewhere.
What the woman told me was on Sampson Drive, like midway in the block, there's a vacant lot or something.
Hold on, I'll let you talk to the Liberty dispatcher.
So they heard these calls coming into the police department and them sending officers out to respond.
County dispatch, may I help you? Hi, dear. This is Stacy from 33. Hi, Stacy. How are you? I got one of your phone calls. Did you really? This woman was almost 15. Sorry. She saw something. She told me that the area was like Sampson Drive. There's a vacant field midway through the block. They're telling me this too, but it's probably some weather balloon or something. You know what I mean? They're checking the area, but these UFO calls are getting out of hand. I don't know what it is. If it was, what the hell did they come to Liberty for? There's no intelligent life in Liberty. Come on now. We're telling everybody they're doing a sequel to what's that new Star Trek movie, Generations? Bluish green, no noise. It was low flying and took off. Oh, come on. Fifth Avenue. Are you serious? It's driving up Fifth Avenue Extension. Now, oh, Christ. Not driving. Are you flying? It came down and just zooped over. It was a big, glowing object. Well, we got 4 calls on it. The last guy said it was a fighter plane. So you tell me that I would do a big news story on the water and Liberty and the effects on the people, because these people are clearly afflicted. But I appreciate the tip. I'll let them know some more on it. I dispatched it because God only knows my luck. You would land here, abduct some people, and I would be in trouble for dispatching. I was impressed because I heard the way you dispatched it, and I said she's trying real hard not to break. And I'm working with the biggest jokers on the force tonight, so it's real hard not to. Well, if we do run into a UFO, I swear I will call you personally. Okay? We'll give you an exclusive. Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, this reporter says, hey, I just had a woman call in. She was just about in tears. And she said she saw a UFO out in Sampson Drive. Really? And they start making jokes about it. And she goes, she goes, the woman's reporting like a green light. And the dispatch says, yeah, we're checking it now. We're looking at it. And she goes, and then she makes this big joke. She goes, who'd want to come to Liberty, Ohio, or Liberty anyway? Because she goes, there's no intelligent life here in Liberty. And this is dispatch. And she goes, I don't know. Maybe it's the water. She goes, we got some pretty bad water around here. Maybe people are, getting infected by the water. Well, they say that, hey, no, this person reported an object. And then you get more phone calls coming in where somebody reported seeing an object 50 feet off the ground traveling down the street.
Radio.
Not any good.
Yeah. CC spot me said it appeared to be hovering about 50 feet off the ground, heading towards Bottom Hutch, and I'm going to be checking that area. It's supposed to be a large object with a lot of lights on it.
Sir, I have another report on Sampson Drive, and also we've been advised by caller to the media. Media informed us it was a blue-green object hovering, no noise. It was in the area of Fifth Avenue Extension.
I'll go that Fifth Avenue Extension just came in.
This is just in now.
There's reportedly even an elderly gentleman out there walking, down the street, had a dog out. And he said that the object was moving above a house.
Wow.
Well, different ones are saying, oh, maybe it's stars. And by the way, I went back and I've got astronomy software that can duplicate sky patterns going back who knows how far. And I put myself in that area in Youngstown on the longitude and latitude coordinates and went back to 1994. And you could see like Sirius low in the sky on one side, and then Vega low in the skyline on another side. And maybe some of the stuff they were seeing could be explained away as that maybe out of low hysteria. But when you had somebody saying, hey, this thing was moving above us,
yeah,
it was going down the street, it was coming towards us.
And they're describing it being 50 feet above the ground, I mean.
And changing colors, too.
Yeah, 50 feet above the ground. Well, then they call up dispatch. Or dispatch calls up, I should say, air traffic control.
Air traffic control, sir.
You get the guy from air traffic control. And I don't know if you ever heard those air traffic control people online before, but they got this very, almost like a monotone voice, some of them.
Yes, sir. This is Ryan from Liberty Township Police Department. Yes, Ohio. We have reported some flying object in our jurisdiction, in our area, above the Sampson Drive, Fifth Avenue extension area. I could not give you any kind of traffic, direction that would help you know that area. Do you know of anything that should be in our airspace this time, close to the ground?
Right
This is not a prank phone call, I swear. You can call me back and verify.
Look at the radar scope, and I go 60-mile diameter of Youngstown, and there is nothing out there.
And the guy comes on the phone, and she goes, I'm with Liberty Police Department, and we're checking to see if if there's anybody reporting, anything unusual in the sky out here. And the guy goes, no, I just looked them over at my radar out here, and he says, we've got nothing for 60 miles. And she goes, you have nothing? And she goes, shit. And it's like, again, that nature of the voice. It's like, oh, damn, how do I explain this?
Oh, shit.
Not even anything else high.
We've got five accounts, 5 calls in on this.
Yeah.
Something's flying in our area and it's low to the ground. Would you be able to monitor like a Cessna or something with a light on it?
Well, if it was, do you mean visibly?
No, with a radar.
With the radar, it depends on how high it is and where they are. If it's low radar coverage, so there's
Okay, now I have to go over here and tell them something, and I don't want to say you couldn't find anything. Is there any, clause I might use that it might be like a personal aircraft or something that might be used at night or something?
Could be, it could be anything. As far as any kind of helicopter traffic, anything down low, they don't have any kind of requirements to.
It made no noise.
They're coming into the airport here.
Okay, so you have no communications with helicopters. It could be something like that.
Yeah, it could be a helicopter.
Okay.
Helicopters particularly.
Okay. All right, I'm buying this 100%. But
are you? Is that location anywhere near a hospital?
We are close to a hospital, but the location is away from. It's as low as they said it was to the ground. It would be approximately 5 miles away from the hospital. We're closer to that end of town is closer to out towards the Vienna line, Vienna Air Base area, and that's what I thought maybe it was related to.
Yeah, we haven't had anything going on. Nothing coming in that direction.
Okay. Then I'm going to repeat.
Guys just go out here northbound, climbed up high, and nothing's going on over there.
Okay, I am going to advise you of this. You could take it and file it in your G and in your garbage can if you want to. We've got accounts of this. Hold on 1 second for me. Okay, I've got 4 to 6 calls. Hold on 1 second. Smart ass. Okay, at this time, I've had 4 to 6 calls come in about a lit object, well-lit object, blue-green lights, hovering above the area of Sampson Drive and Fifth Avenue. The object was low to the ground, did not make any noise, hovered there for some time, and then continued moving down the Fifth Avenue extension road. My unit was out. He caught something he thought was red. Somebody described it as the end of a fighter pilot plane. I don't know what the hell kind of lines of continuum they're drawing here. I don't see any, but this is what I was advised of, so I wanted to call.
Okay, well, we don't, I have if I was downstairs in the radar room, I would have a finder with some phone numbers. We have some 800 numbers as far as, identified flying object reports and things like that. If you wish, you can call during business hours tomorrow.
Like I said, I don't know.
I don't see anything out there, nothing on the radar scope. I haven't seen anything, and, we don't really do anything with the information.
Okay, I thought I'd pass along in case somebody was maybe flying without permission and, night flying or something like that. I didn't know what was going on, but as long as I've done my job passing along, and I don't want to sound like a crackpot, but that's what we've got in so far. Okay, thank you. Bye.
So let me ask you this. Would a helicopter show up on radar or anything that didn't log a flight plan that would still be visible on the radar to the tower, right?
On the radar, yes, as long as it's not too low. Well, that was actually one of the questions that she asked ATC. She goes, well, could this, would a helicopter not show if it was too low? He goes, oh, it could. That's a possibility. And she goes, basically, that works for me. So she was looking for a way out, and you could see it.
But that happens all over the country.
Yeah, and I can monitor flight traffic and transponders because I've got I've got an antenna up on my roof where I've got a receiver that I can pick up the transponders of aircraft in the area.
Really?
Yeah, but I can also, I'm hooked into a network where I can pick up stuff, across the country, and even the world for that matter if I want. So, like, when you see an airliner go down, I can take and follow that airline and pick up where its transponder and stuff was at. Right now, I'm working some of the data for one of the reports that they've been talking about on the local news about the drones off the California coast back in 2019. I'm pulling up the archival air traffic in that region.
You do everything that you're into is fascinating, and it's cool that you have the technology and that you're willing to put in the kind of man hours that requires.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just being like the geek, really, because that's what I guess I've been all these years, and I kind of probably fit in with like Big Bang Theory for all I know, you know. He'd be that type of geek.
Well, I appreciate the way your mind works, and I just want to jump back to the Trumbull County UFO. One of the things that you said on your podcast, and it's a really good point that hadn't occurred to me until you said it, was that how could the guy in the tower not be seeing anything when there's reports from the airport of people seeing something?
That's right.
So does that make you skeptical of the story?
Well, the thing is the airport really wasn't that far from the region where all this was happening at. Liberty is actually fairly close, and the one airport out there in Youngstown, they call it Vienna Center. That's where the tower was at. He said he didn't see anything from the tower himself. But then again, maybe if something is low enough to be around, he may not see it.
Right. I mean, if it's 50 feet above the ground, he might not see it.
Yeah.
Well, where it really gets interesting at is you mentioned earlier the name of Toby Marrero. In the tapes, when you play them, they'll mention his name a few times, but when I went back and re-listened to tapes myself, there was a point that popped up was really interesting. You hear in this case a cruiser being sent out to Samson Drive. Well, the guys, you hear the officer call back in, and he says, did any of these witnesses give addresses? No. Well, next time, would you please get an address from these witnesses? It would really help. Oh, yeah, we can do that.
If you get any more calls, try to get an address. I'd like to speak to the people making the call, please.
Copy.
498 radio.
Then, about the next clip that comes in, the officer goes, I need a few minutes here to get my thoughts back together. And they start, and not him, but the dispatcher starts laughing about it, making jokes. She doesn't know what just happened. Well, Toby Marrero was the one who was sent out to Samson Drive. And there's appears to be maybe some inaccuracies between what you'd see on some of the TV shows involving the same case. But Toby Marrero went out to that street, Samson Drive.
I have another report on Samson Drive.
And it runs north-south. I've actually gone out there myself in that region because I used to work on that area. And at that time, in the 1990s, you had housing roughly about maybe 100 feet from the road, something like that. So you had a fair distance from the road back to the houses. And it was a nice suburban neighborhood that was just pretty much on the edge of starting to grow. You had some vacant fields in there. He's driving down the road, and all of a sudden, his cruiser dies. Everything goes out. Electrical, everything.
Classic
Car
UFO.
off. Yeah. Boom. And next thing, it's like that bad B movie, boom, the light comes on above you. Rolls the window down, looks out, and here's this light that's directly above, and it's on for like 30 seconds.
It was like a red pulsating light.
Well, according to some of the things I've been able to find out, one point he thought about getting his gun out and shooting at it, which he didn't. He said, I thought about it and I got better, who knows what's going through his mind. Maybe something like, what if it's a helicopter? What if it's this? What if it's that? And he said it was a bright red light, extremely intense. He could not see any structure to it, other than the fact it was an extremely intense, bright red light.
The video was advised to be blue and green.
I saw it was red. It was like a pulsating light. It was like pointing to the bottom of the airplane, but it was real big.
The light's on for like 30 seconds, then starts going slowly away from him. Well, this is when he radioed dispatch and said, I need a minute to get back together. This thing had just been over his head and left, and he was trying to rationalize what the heck happened to him. So he finally regains his senses, and he goes, I gotta go after this thing. So the lights on the cruiser come back up, so he's able to restart the car and get it going again. And he takes off, but when he goes down the road, the thing is gone. He doesn't know where it went to. Another officer, and you had, when you listen to tapes, there were quite a few different radio dispatches coming in from different officers around the region. And some may have been seeing stars based on what they're reporting. A lot, maybe out of a little hysteria because everybody else was reporting so much stuff at close. Well, one of the officers, his name was James Baker, he goes out to Brookfield Center, which was actually an old abandoned radar tower. Well, this radar tower is really being used like for Defense Department purposes back until like 80s, 90s when they shut it down.
It's like a Cold War thing?
Yeah. It's like a dome, basically. And some parts of the stuff is actually still out there, but not the whole facility itself is gone. Well, he goes out there, and he wants to get a better view, and it's one of the highest things in the area, so he climbs the tower up. And he's looking out, and this is a great part of the tape. He's looking out and says, I can see these lights off at a distance, and it kind of looks like a Christmas tree. He said these lights are flashing out. They're almost like a Christmas tree. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, please be a star. Please be a star.
Oh, Jesus Christ, please be a plane. Oh, please. What, I ain't ready for this shit. Hold on. Little bitch, where'd you go?
And the thing had turned and started coming back towards him. And he was panicking. But his whole nature just completely flipped. And then all of a sudden he comes back to his senses. But he was just getting extremely upset that, hey, this thing may be something unusual, and I don't want to be up on this tower. Well, you had the skeptics come out and try to explain a lot of stuff away that they were seeing, like as being stars, meteors. You even had different ones saying that, that air base out there, Vienna, it's a air reserve guard base, Army Reserve Guard base. You get right now like C-130s coming in. But C-130s, I think they have some Black Hawk helicopters over there too.
Yeah, you see them around here flying over on their way over there occasionally.
Yeah, and they say, hey, maybe it's a stealth helicopter or something they're flying over there, but I don't believe that. The base itself is, I don't think it's high enough level to have anything like that over there.
And I mean,
reported no sound.
Yeah, no sound whatsoever.
Why would they be powering down police vehicles and things like that if it's our military and risk being exposed?
Exactly. I mean, Malero was saying that this thing was about 50 feet off the ground, had no noise. He said the light actually is about like daylight.
Wow.
Yeah, and size of a football field.
Yeah, I mean, it was big.
Did you ever interview any of the civilian witnesses that were calling in to the 911 center?
No, I never got a hold of them on there. And I know I I know Kenny Young said he talked to a couple people, but he didn't document who it was.
I wonder if anybody's still in the area, on those roads that still lives there that remembers that night.
It's possible. It's possible. I mean, Bolero actually was still on duty over in Youngstown last I knew.
Really?
Yeah, because it was really wild. I was a director at a college over there. And I go walking in the building, and I see these bubblegum machines sitting in their lobby. And I said, who owns these bubblegum machines? And they said, some police officer does. And I don't know why. And this is funny. I don't know why, but the first thing I went through my mind is, I wonder if this guy from Liberty Township, the police officer, was involved with the UFO. I said, here's the guy to investigate UFO. What's the chances of that happening?
It's pretty long odds, for real.
Well, my secretary gives me the guy's card, and it's Toby Marrero. Malero. It's the guy.
I think you've got a latent psychic ability happening here.
Something.
Well, I tried to call him a couple times over some other things, but I couldn't get through to him. A couple instances we had out on the campus, but I always wanted to talk to him one-on-one. I didn't want to call him out, directly on that. I thought about getting a cup of coffee with him someday. I really did.
I mean, it would be fascinating for you two to sit down and talk,
Oh, yeah, because, I'm the one, I would say, hey, tell me your story. I don't care how boring it is, It's not going to be the TV show, which I don't expect it to be, but, tell me exactly in your mind what happened, in your own words. Because too many of the shows exaggerate, elaborate, and do everything else, and really distort the story. And some of these reports are actually much better if they didn't do all the exaggerations and all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because some of the things are actually just so mysterious that they're hard to figure out, where the TV shows want to have a real nice package that, like, it's clearly an alien, clearly here to do research or whatever, but we don't have any idea for real.
Exactly. And this whole thing over in Trumbull County, even it got to the point that the dispatcher got some calls from some of the officers. Hey, go outside the dispatch and look outside the station. Look, you'll see the object such and such a sky. And even one of them said, I'll come by and I'll bring you out to where I'm at right now. Maybe you can see it.
Yeah, I remember that. She asked someone else to plug in for her so she can go take her break and try to ride out and see it.
And so she went out. She saw it, right? Yeah.
Well, she didn't say 100%, but she went out with the guy. Put it that way.
Now, she kind of remains skeptical about it, right?
Yeah, and I think she does, and like from my point of view, some people may kind of like say, you're just debunking stuff, but some of the things that they were seeing that night, I think really did go back to stars, but in reality, it may go back to the point of you've got a little mass hysteria going on because you've got somebody who's got some really unusual things happening. You've got people monitoring scanners, and not just TV stations, but local people in the area were monitoring their scanners in their houses, picking up on the story. So this could have created a little bit of hysteria.
Does MUFON have kind of an official ruling on this case, whether it was identified or, whatever the parameters that you guys use are?
No, they don't. And this is one that they didn't even look into. This is one that I wish they would have, but to my knowledge, they didn't investigate this one. And the bad part is about the UFO field. I've got a ton of stuff in my garage. Half my garage is actually UFO material.
Wow, you have a cool garage.
Yeah, books, magazines, all sorts of articles going way back to like the 1940s and 50s.
Like those old sci-fi, pulp fiction kind of magazines?
I've got some of those, even comic
Astonishing
books.
Tales and...
Yeah, exactly. But I've also got a lot of stuff because there were so many UFO groups, especially going back to like the 60s, 70s. Out there, they had conventions, they had different talks going on. Well, they published periodicals with those. And one of my friends gave me a ton of that stuff. And I've inherited some of that stuff also from some other UFO researchers, because the problem is, as people like myself get older, what happens to all this research we gathered? Sometimes the family just says, we're going to put it in file 13. Well, one of the groups I'm involved with, we digitize stuff and we share it between each other so that maybe, we're creating like this mammoth library. Well, when you go back to these cases like in the 1990s and before, a lot of stuff was all on hard copy, handwritten out. Even though the reports were printed, people were still filling in stuff by hand.
Yeah. And then it wasn't searchable or smart in any way.
And that's the problem. So now you've got to try to make stuff searchable, try to find ways to record it, catalog it to make it easier to find. So when you go back to the 1990s, there may have been a lot more stuff in that region going on, but the problem is maybe one, the researchers who had that stuff passed away and all that research material's gone, or it's in a form that's whoever has it, it's not searchable.
Well, it'd definitely be handy if you did get it to a point where you could search it. So then, any triangular craft you could lump together in a search, or people are describing seeing a light that shifts between green and blue. Put that together in one and start to see maybe patterns.
And that's what I've done to one group. I've shared my stuff with them, and they've shared a couple terabytes of digitized information of me. And that doesn't include everything I've got in hard copy in my garage that I've logged what all books I've got out there. Because I've gone back through on some cases I've worked, and one of my friends out of Michigan area who shared a lot of stuff with me, a buddy of mine said, hey, back in the 1980s, he says, I filled out a UFO report because I saw something back in the 70s. I said, really? I said, where did you fill out the report at? He says, well, this guy was going around shopping malls, had UFO displays set up. And he goes, he had all these displays talking about UFOs, and he was collecting reports from people. I said, was his name John Timmerman? He goes, yeah, I think it was now that you mention it. Well, I went through my files a friend of mine shared with me, and I found John Timmerman's files. I go in to the mall that this guy said he was at, and I found his report from the 1980s.
So you have a weird, odd ability at being in the right place at the right time and just knowing certain information that, like my brother said, it's almost like you kind of have a sixth sense and a lot of luck, I think.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of both on there. Because one of the things, getting off the subject a little bit, that got me into it, the UFO thing, is not only my own experiences, but I picked up a book back in high school. They used to have where you could buy paperback books like every month through like a paperback sales thing.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and I remember my mom gave me like $1 and I could buy like 2 or 3 books each time with that $1. And one of the first books I ever bought was called Flying Saucers, Serious Business. And it was done by a guy called Frank Edwards, who was actually a ABC news broadcaster at one time. And Frank Edwards was the forerunner before like the George Knapps, the George Norries, Art Bells. He goes back before all those guys. And he was talking about UFOs on radio even. Well, he treated it like a very, very real subject. And I always loved that book. By today's standards, it'd be dated, probably not be interesting to a lot of people. But here's the weird story behind it. I got a phone call one day from somebody saying, hey, I've got a ton of UFO research stuff from my dad. My dad passed away like 15 years ago. And this stuff has been sitting in a barn for years. He was an investigator. Would you like it? I said, yeah, I'll take it. What have you got? Well, I got a few boxes. Well, I drive down and I fill up 2 SUVs full of reports. And I found that their dad was actually a very, very big investigator back in the 1960s.
Cool.
And he was well known. And I got 2 2 SUV fulls, and I'm going through stuff, and I found a thing where the group that the guy was director of, president of, back in the 1960s, tried to hire Frank Edwards to come in to talk, and they did. They paid him to come in to speak at a college in Cleveland, and they paid him to come in, and they had like 1,500 people show up. Oh. Well, here, this guy, the first book I read, here's his publicity stills, here's the contract that was signed, and even had a nasty letter in here where saying, "You guys never paid me." Here's the follow-up that says, "Oops, never mind, I found a check." But I thought, can't that happening, you know?
I'm so glad you got your hands on that. Eventually, this is all we'll need to go to, like, the Smithsonian or something.
Well, the guys I shared up with in Michigan, I told them about the research material I came from, because what was interesting about that is I'm going through this research material, I'm looking through this stuff, and here's, back in the 1960s, people used to advertise in the back of, like, Popular Mechanics, learn to be like Charles Atlas.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, and all that type of stuff. Well, he was selling copies of UFO reports for like a quarter, a nickel, whatever it was. Here he kept a log of everybody who requested the information from him. And I opened these cards up and looked at all the names on there, and I recognized half a dozen names.
One was actually.
No, I wasn't in there, but one of my...
he was probably connected with the CIA or something, like keeping track of everyone that's asking questions about UFOs.
Well, the funny part is half a dozen of them are authors now.
Really?
They started reading as a kid about this stuff, and they continued it all these years.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I emailed one of the guys. I looked him up on the internet, emailed him, and I told him how I found his name, and he goes, "You got his research material?" He says, "You hit one of the mother lodes." Because he says, "I remember sending like a 20 cents or a quarter into the guy for the article."
Wow. You know, your investigations and just your whole life, I guess, has taken you on these crazy little twists and turns as you're trying to track down what's going on up there.
It's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much.
It's interesting, doing this stuff. I really love the challenge too.
That was just such a great story to hear from, someone like him that really spent the time doing the research and kind of digging through the tapes and everything. And it's funny when you listen to them, like, at a certain point towards the end, like with how shaken some of those officers were, and everyone was seeing it. And the dispatcher, who I really grew to like listening to her, like, she's funny, she's kind of spunky, I like her, but she's like, I'm not going to make a report.
Yeah.
Like, no one wants the hassle.
Well, a lot of them were worried about their jobs. And, I was doing some extra research, like the National UFO Reporting site. They have some stuff about this. And the guy that was doing the digging there, I put it up on our website too, but he said that almost everybody that was working the air traffic control tower for both the civilian airport and for the airbase was replaced within months after that. So, I mean, there's that, I don't want to report this because I don't want to lose my job aspect. And that's changing. I mean, it's changing big now, right? Because of what ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification, whatever program.
Yeah, I mean, for the Pentagon was studying this, and they've changed their stance, like we were talking, where they want this stuff reported. But you'll remember even when Tom was talking about, again, that great Tic Tac video that was filmed by the Navy, the Air Force, whoever pilots, and one of the pilots is a female pilot, which is remarkable because there's not a whole lot of them, so it's worth mentioning. And she's still active, so she hasn't come out. So, like, even now, if you want your career to keep going, you probably don't mention this stuff.
Yeah, nobody's gotten promoted to anything, I don't think, for talking about UFOs. But it is changing, and, now we have the Pentagon and people like Marco Rubio and different senators and people like that saying that they need help trying to figure out what this is. So,
right.
I mean, does that make it seem to you that, like, this 1994 UFO case was probably really a UFO? It probably wasn't an airplane or a weather balloon or something that a planet or a star that's fooling all these cops and civilians you know?
Right. Well, I mean, I would say knowing what we know, and like to go to that Marco Rubio quote, you know, he's a former presidential candidate, and he's saying he's interested in this because he knows for a fact that they are flying over our military facilities. So he must have these reports, right? He says they're flying over our military installations. They're not ours. We don't know whose they are. So it's at the point where you have these like very respectable, real people that they don't care if it's a UFO, if it's an alien, or, you know, a North Korean fighter pilot or whatever. They just want to know what it is. And another one that I was listening to was that Louis Elizondo.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he's basically ruled out a foreign power. He said this isn't just being like decades behind. This is centuries behind. This is like if someone had cars and everyone else had like horse and buggy. Like,
yeah, I didn't even think that is a good comparison. I mean, like, I was listening to him too, and he was talking about our best jet fighters, the best that United States of America has, and we have the most advanced Air Force, most advanced military that's ever existed on the planet. Our jets can pull 17 Gs, while our pilots can handle 9 Gs. Basically, the average pilot can handle 9 Gs. The plane can handle 17 Gs for a couple seconds. These things, like the Tic Tac video, it's pulling 600 Gs. Like, we didn't even understand how it's not collapsing or tearing itself apart.
And that's the thing too. Like, I would be interested in, maybe some of our listeners can reach out, or we can find someone that is, you know, smart enough to have an understanding of like what's on the edge of engineering for this kind of stuff. Because I don't even know if this is on the horizon. I remember I read something interesting, probably just on Reddit or something, that said like if you went to the 80s with like a smartwatch, like how astounded would everybody be? And, you know, they said a lot of people would be surprised, but there's probably a couple guys working at like Toshiba in Tokyo that'd be like, oh yeah, this is what we're working on. Like in 30 years, this will be on your, you know, like, does anyone even have a clue? Is there anyone even?
I don't think so.
Like this stuff?
I really don't. I think that's why the Pentagon is putting that stuff out there, and why ATIP and things like that exist, is because no idea. I mean, how do you comprehend a craft with no heat signature that breaks the sound barrier, or it goes faster than the speed of sound without breaking the sound barrier? There's no visible means of propulsion. There's no wings. They don't understand how it even has lift. And then it's doing this transmedium thing where it's going from space to our atmosphere to flying around to going into the water.
The only thing, like, if I want it to be real cynical and try to think of just a natural phenomenon, that's what it would be. Like, maybe there's some way energy behaves that we're just becoming aware of, but, you know, that many smarter people than me have witnessed this firsthand, and that's not their takeaway. So I don't think that's what it is.
Well, I mean, like, what do you mean though? Like, expand on that a little bit. Like, it's not a just intelligent thing behind it. It's just some kind of weird, like, energy storm or something.
Just because, you know, I would venture to guess that every year humans spend more time in the sky than they did the year previous. Definitely over the course of decades, we're up in places we never used to be. So maybe this has been a weird thing that's been going on forever, and that's why we do have like ancient, but it's just some natural thing. Like, I'm an open-minded person, and I'm definitely open-minded to UFOs. Like, I think I lean towards an extraterrestrial, which is crazy. But, you know, there's lots of stuff. We're always discovering new stuff about the way this planet works that we never knew. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely want to get into this more, and probably we'll do an episode just kind of about like whether extraterrestrials exist or not. But, you know, researching this has got me, you know how you go down these crazy rabbit holes, looking at the Drake equation, and which basically says there's millions upon hundreds of millions of stars like our star, and there's got to be millions and millions and millions of planets like our star. But it doesn't make sense why, if there's these hyper advanced intelligent civilizations, and we're seeing craft maybe from them, that we know that they're galaxy spreading, they can travel through at least their own solar system and into ours. Why aren't we finding anything at all showing that there is intelligent life? Like, wouldn't they try to create like a transcendent kind of universe for themselves? Like, we're not picking up any beacons. You know, one of the first things that SETI set out to do to find extraterrestrials was they assumed that if there was more intelligent races, that they would want to help the races coming up, or the species coming up, and that they would leave beacons. And like, we pretty much ruled that out, because study's been going long enough that even if something was really far away, we should have got a signal from them
I'm just trying to think of. There's a name for a theory. I think they call it the zoo hypothesis. And that's one of the scarier ones. And it's like
that we're quarantined or a wildlife preserve.
We're quarantined, and one of my ones, and I'm sure this is not my original thought, but I was just thinking, like, because I've heard some people think it might be that because we are on the edge of the Milky Way galaxy or whatever, or relatively, and the Earth is like we're just kind of in the outskirts of it. Maybe we're up against another galaxy that has a super powerful alien nation that is not letting anyone else explore, and they know about us, and they're keeping us as their weird little zoo science experiment. And like maybe there's a good alien UFO that wants to visit, and they keep getting shut off by these guys. Because it's weird. Like Drake's equation basically says there should be, I don't know, like tens of thousands of civilizations, right?
I mean, many times more than that, and that we're probably not the oldest civilization, so there should be civilizations that are millions of years ahead of us. Some of the different people that are into this say that maybe once you get smart enough, you either A, destroy yourself or create virtual reality, and that virtual reality is so much better than real life that they all are just living in like virtual reality now. That's actually something that...
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things about like theoretical physics, and also where it fails you. It's like alternate dimensions is a great explanation, but if once you accept that, then that could be the answer for literally everything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We know that there's something there. I mean, like, these craft are something, and they seem to have intelligence behind them, so we have to figure out that they could be interdimensional, it could be demonic, it could be so many different things, and I think that will make a great episode where we just kind of go over that.
I definitely think so, and I would like to get some experts on it too. But what you reminded me of, because I were focusing so much on it being like like an energy ball or whatever, or spiritual. You know, according to Harry Reid, former senator, you know, he was on the Foreign Relations Committee, a bigwig. He says that he had a good reason to believe that Lockheed Martin, the defense contractor, had a UFO in one of its facilities. And he actually, as part of his investigation into this through the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, he asked to go visit, and they turned him down. So why they turned him down, he doesn't know. He said they just said no.
It's pretty crazy that he thinks that they might have it. And I would love that if he would like go more on why he thinks Lockheed Martin has it. I mean, like, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking they must be trying to reverse engineer something. And that's why the U.S. will give it to their most like trusted, you know, contractor to look at it.
Well, I mean, I wish I could remember the name. There's a guy, and our people that are really in the UFO community will know. He's another one of these government guys, and he said he can't prove it, but he's like 99.9% sure we are using reverse engineer UFO stuff. And that's, again, people that are like kind of agnostic, saying, I don't know if it's alien UFO or just like a height of the Cold War, the Russians dropped something and we started stealing from it and no one really knows what it is. Because that's always a possibility too. Like some of these things could be the decades-long game of telephone started during the Cold War, and what was really just, you know, Ivan's satellite became a Martian craft.
I mean, I can see it, but then I can't. Like, when you think about, and I don't know a whole lot about jet fighters or anything like that, but they obviously have way more computer aspect to them nowadays. But I mean, the basic principle isn't different from what they were doing in the 50s, right? I mean, like a jet propulsion flying these planes. It's not some radical new fuel source or something like that.
But yeah, I mean, who knows how many leaps we've had just on our own technology from learning. I mean, because what if it is so beyond anything that we can do? Like, we're just too much as monkeys to even know what to do other than like gathering little bits and pieces here of how to do something. You know, I don't know. Because obviously, unless some of these UFOs that we're seeing are actually prototypes now of ours, we haven't figured out the whole.
I just had a really scary thought. You know, like the Nazi program were the first people that had like a jet fighter, right? And they were the first people that were doing rocket stuff, like with the V2 bomb. And then after World War II, we got some of their scientists to work on our space
Operation
program.
Paperclip. I don't know I don't know if they were the first or not, but they were like
pioneering
the best.
Pioneering it. What if? I mean, it's scary if that was reverse engineered. That meant that the aliens like chose Hitler to give them their stuff. There would be really bad aliens out there.
Well, yeah, it could be, or disinterested aliens that don't really know, or, you know, maybe they just crash landed in Poland. That's why he had to get in Poland so bad. That'd be a cool movie.
Mm-hmm. That would be a cool movie.
The whole World War II is about getting a UFO.
Man, you keep making me go off or like just want to keep going down this road. But that's the other thing too about if there's these far away, super smart alien race, why do they come all the way to Earth to crash at the last mile? You know?
Yeah. Although, if they crashed in space, we'd never know. So,
good point. That's a good point too. I don't know. Well, we got a lot. I think that the next month, when the report comes out from the government, we'll definitely be trying to get our hands on it and go over that. And I'm sure millions of people on this planet are going to be going over it, and there's going to be lots of great discussions coming. I think that you're in the new golden age of UFO and alien speculation.
So that is going to do it for us for this week. Next week, we're going to have the rest of the Tom Wertman interview.
Yeah, we're going to be playing a story that he told us that took place down in Salt Fork. It's a true story. It's super crazy. We actually went down to Salt Fork to investigate that, and we came up with a whole other story. So I think, Dan, the working title is just going to be Salt Fork Stories coming up, because I have 2 really good stories for you.
And if you're a fan of more of the true crime part of the Invisible Ships podcast, hang in there. We'll get back to it. We're just in the middle of what Rick is calling the summer of woo.
Yeah, we want to talk about all the truly weird stuff that has been, going through our heads and that we wanted to get into. So that's what we're doing all summer.
So in the meantime, just make sure you subscribe, leave a good review if you don't mind. That helps other people find us. And check us out. We have a new logo done by Kate Reynolds Burfica. We'll link to her website. She's a great artist, and
check us out online. We're putting up some stuff to go along with the podcast, even on this case. So there'll be links and different things in the show notes. And I guess that's gonna be it. So until next time.
Invisible Ships Podcast. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Invisible Ships Productions, LLC. Until next time, shipmates.
Until next time, shipmates.